Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled Astrid's Trace, the story that built a new world. Act 1, The Morning of Wonder. The first light of spring crept quietly through the slats of the blinds, casting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. A robin chirped insistently outside, as if it too were eager for the day to begin. Inside a cozy, book-lined home tucked in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, Felix Rhodes was already awake. He moved with the practiced ease of someone who cherished calm routines, grinding fresh coffee beans, lighting a small vanilla-scented candle in the kitchen, and flipping the page of a weathered novel. As he waited for the kettle to whistle. The kettle, however, was stubborn this morning. So, Felix occupied himself by staring at a corkboard beside the fridge, where he'd pinned a note weeks ago: Spring Market, this Saturday. Don't forget. Today was that Saturday. He looked forward to it every year, the Maplewood Spring Bazaar. Held at the fairgrounds just outside town, it only came around twice a year, but to collectors, dreamers, and treasure hunters like Felix, it felt like a secret holiday. A celebration of the forgotten, the whimsical, the one-of-a-kind. And this year, he wasn't going alone. A gravelly honk erupted from the driveway. Felix smiled. He poured the hot water over his coffee grounds, filled 2 travel mugs, his and one marked with a doodled fox and the name Rye, and headed for the door. Outside, a vintage red van waited, its paint faded but charming, like a postcard from the 70s. Rye Morgan leaned out the window with a grin too wide for someone who hadn't had his caffeine yet. Did you bring the good stuff, or am I suffering through gas station sludge again? Rye teased. Felix passed him the fox mug without a word. Rye sniffed it, raised his eyebrows, and gave an approving nod. They exchanged no more words than necessary as Felix climbed in. That was one of the best things about their friendship. No pressure to perform. No small talk needed. Just shared understanding, punctuated by the occasional dry joke or burst of unexpected laughter. As the van rumbled to life and turned out of the neighborhood, the morning air flowed through the open windows, filled with the scent of lilacs and fresh-cut grass. Trees had erupted into bloom almost overnight, and petals drifted lazily through the sky like soft confetti. It felt like nature itself was celebrating something. Rye reached over and flicked on the old radio. The only station it picked up was halfway between folk music and some kind of farm report, but the muffled voices and gentle banjo made for oddly soothing background noise. They passed suburban lawns peppered with yard sale signs and neighbors walking dogs. The city faded behind them, replaced by rolling fields and budding orchards. Felix rested his head against the seat, sipping his coffee and letting the van's hum lull him into a quiet daze. I swear, Rye muttered, if I don't find a ceramic frog today, I'm demanding a refund from the universe.
Felix chuckled.
Is that the new obsession? No, the current obsession. Next week it'll be vintage fishing lures I'll never use. That's fair. They crested a hill, and there it was, the Maplewood Fairgrounds. Dozens of colorful tents were already set up, like a patchwork quilt stitched across the earth. The scent of popcorn and cinnamon wafted through the open air even from the parking lot. Cars and trucks were parked in uneven rows, and people wandered between them, carrying folding chairs or crates. Ry pulled into a dusty spot beneath an oak tree and cut the engine. They sat for a moment, finishing their coffee. Ready to hunt? Felix asked. Ry cracked his neck dramatically. Born ready. They stepped out into the morning sunshine, stretching like cats after a long nap. A woman nearby was selling raffle tickets and greeting people with homemade lemonade. A little girl ran past holding a balloon shaped like a mushroom. It was, without doubt, going to be a good day. Before diving into the rows of booths, Felix paused. He looked around at the fairgrounds, the vibrant chaos, the anticipation in the air, the strangers who were, for a few hours, united by a love of discovery. There's something magic about it, he said, mostly to himself. Ry raised an eyebrow. Magic? Yeah. I don't know. Every time I come here, I feel like something unusual is bound to happen. Ry smirked. You say that every year. And I'm never wrong. With a grin, he turned toward the path between tents, where the first vendors were setting up. One was laying out vintage kitchenware with surprising care, another arranging postcards from places that no longer existed. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a bell rang, and wind chimes sang as the breeze moved through them. Felix's gaze landed on a booth further down, one with a canvas roof stitched from patches of old denim, and a banner that read simply, "The Curio Caravan." He didn't know why, but something tugged at him. There was something waiting in that tent. And so, with coffee in one hand and possibilities in the other, Felix and Ry stepped into the maze of wonder, unaware that this trip would uncover more than just antiques. It would uncover memories, choices, and maybe even a little bit of magic. Act 2, The Curio Caravan. The first few booths were familiar, comfortingly so. Rows of mismatched dinner plates, old soda bottles stacked like colorful towers, faded comic books sealed in plastic sleeves. The vendors called out friendly greetings, adjusting displays, or sipping from thermoses. Felix and Ry nodded back, but their feet kept moving. They didn't know why, but both were drawn to that curious tent with the patchwork roof, the Curio Caravan. It stood at the far end of the first row, slightly removed from the rest. The booth wasn't set up like the others. Instead of folding tables and crates, it had long velvet-lined trays with small trinkets arranged in deliberate patterns. The air inside the tent was a little cooler, shaded from the rising sun, and faintly smelled of sandalwood and something sweet like orange blossoms. A woman stood behind the counter, her gray-streaked braid draped over one shoulder. Her name tag simply read Juniper. "Welcome," she said in a calm, melodic voice. "You're just in time." "For what?" Rai asked, squinting at a display of pocket watches. Juniper smiled. "For the piece that's meant to find you." Felix tilted his head. "You don't mean we find it?" "Oh no," she said, with a wink. "It finds you." The moment she said it, a glimmer caught Felix's eye, a glint from a corner shelf half hidden behind a rack of wind chimes made from cutlery. He stepped forward, drawn like a moth. It was a small wooden box, no larger than a jewelry case, carved with curling vines and foxes chasing each other in a loop. It was clearly old, but in excellent condition. The moment Felix touched it, a warm tingling spread up his fingers, not unpleasant, but surprising. He looked back at Juniper, but she said nothing. Rai peeked over his shoulder. "That thing's got mystery vibes written all over it?" Felix opened it carefully. Inside, lined with faded green velvet, were 4 items: a brass key, a folded piece of yellowing paper, a single marble with a swirl of silver inside, and an old photograph of 2 boys standing in front of a camper van that looked eerily like Rai's. He froze. Rai." Rai's brow furrowed. "What the?" He took the photograph, staring at it closely. "That is my van." "But that can't be. This photo looks like it's from the 70s. They both turned toward Juniper. "That's impossible," Rai said. "Is it?" Juniper replied softly. "Or is it just undiscovered?" Felix couldn't explain the feeling. The box felt familiar in a way that bypassed logic, like something from a dream, or a forgotten story. His fingertips lingered over the marble. It shimmered as if catching light that wasn't there. "What's the key for?" he asked. Juniper's eyes sparkled. "That's the question, isn't it?" They exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement passing between them. Felix reached for his wallet. Juniper held up a hand. "No charge." "No charge?" Rai echoed, suspicious. "You can't buy what's already yours," she said, and her smile deepened. "But you can choose what to do with it." Felix tucked the box gently into his bag, and they stepped away, both feeling like they'd just been handed the opening line of a novel they didn't know they were living in. The rest of the market beckoned. They wandered through the aisles, but everything felt suddenly changed, like the world had tilted ever so slightly. Felix's thoughts kept drifting back to the box. Who were the boys in the photo? And why did it feel like he should recognize them? They paused at a vintage kitchenware booth. Rai got caught up looking at a ridiculous blender shaped like a rocket ship. Felix drifted to the next stall, still holding the old key in his palm. He didn't even notice the woman selling it watching him. "You found something unusual," she said softly. Felix nodded, slipping the key back into his pocket. "You might want to visit the map booth down near the west path," she added. "Sometimes. Where you're going needs to be seen from above." He blinked. "Sorry." But she just smiled, turned, and returned to rearranging her wares. Near midday, they stopped at a waffle truck, one of Rai's personal missions. Rai ordered a ham and cheese stuffed one, while Felix opted for the classic with lemon curd and powdered sugar. They sat on a wooden bench under a flowering dogwood tree, watching families wander past with paper bags and laughing children. "You okay?" Rai asked between bites. "You've been quiet since the box." Felix hesitated. "I don't know. It just feels like something's happening today." "To be fair," Rai said, "you say that about every flea market." "No. Not like this." Felix pulled the photograph out again. This time, he noticed something else, faint writing on the back. He turned it over. The ink was nearly faded, but still visible. "To the one who remembers. The key opens more than doors." "What does that mean?" Felix whispered. Rai looked over, eyes wide. "Man. Are we in a mystery now? Is this finally Arguni's moment?" Felix gave a soft laugh, but in his chest, something fluttered like wings about to open. As they stood and continued on, the sound of banjo music drifted through the warm spring air again, but to Felix, it felt like a soundtrack now. Like a story was beginning. And somewhere, just out of sight, something or someone was waiting to be rediscovered. Act 3, The Key and the Map. They walked in silence for a while, the buzz of the flea market wrapping around them like a living tapestry. Children tugged on parents' sleeves, vendors shouted cheerful offers, and the air was thick with the scent of grilled onions and cinnamon sugar. But none of it seemed quite real to Felix anymore. He kept thinking about the box. About the photo. About that shimmering marble and the way the key felt warm against his skin even now, through the fabric of his jeans. It was Rai who broke the silence. "So, this map booth," he said casually, licking sugar off his thumb. "We checking it out or what?" Felix nodded. "Yeah. I think we're meant to." They followed the winding paths deeper into the fairgrounds. The crowd thinned the further they went, the booths becoming more eclectic. One featured nothing but typewriter keys turned into cufflinks, another displayed nothing but taxidermy frogs posed in absurd human scenarios. Finally, they spotted it. The map booth. It wasn't marked with a sign, just a pale green parasol shading a wooden table covered entirely in maps, some curled at the edges, others carefully laminated or protected by plastic sleeves. Behind the table sat an elderly man wearing suspenders and glasses so thick they magnified his eyes to cartoonish proportions. He looked up and grinned. "Ah. You found me." Felix stopped short. "You were expecting us?" "Oh no," the man said. "But the key was." Rye narrowed his eyes. "Okay, are you people part of a club or something?" The old man chuckled. "You could say that. Or maybe it's just that things find their way to the right hands, eventually." Felix stepped forward and reached into his pocket, retrieving the brass key. He placed it on the table. The man leaned in, nodding as though greeting an old friend. "May I?" Felix nodded. The man picked up the key, examined it, and then set it down again. He rifled through the maps for a moment before pulling out one that looked far older than the rest. It was printed on thick parchment, the kind that crackles when folded. Strange ink bled through the creases, blue, green, gold, and the edges were slightly singed. "Here," the man said, laying it flat. "This one isn't for navigation. It's for memory." Rye raised a brow. "Memory?" The old man didn't answer. He simply tapped the map. Felix leaned over. At first glance, it appeared to be a stylized rendering of a park or estate-wide lawns, curving paths, a lake shaped like a crescent moon. But as he studied it more closely, his breath caught. He knew this place. Or, at least, it felt like he did. There was something eerily familiar about the layout, especially the circular clearing near the center marked with a tiny symbol, two foxes curled around a key. Felix whispered, "This is where we used to camp." Rye blinked. "You mean that summer, when we were 12? My uncle had that plot of land outside Pine Brook. We stayed for a week in the old camper." Rye's eyes widened. "Dude, that camper looked exactly like the one in the photo." Felix looked again. The map had no street names, no official markings. Just visual symbols, old trails, landmarks drawn in soft gold. But near the bottom corner, in looping script, were the words: "To awaken what was lost, follow the silver path when the sun bows low." "What does it mean?" Felix asked. The old man smiled kindly. "It means the key is not the end of a mystery. It's the beginning of remembering." He rolled the map carefully and handed it to Felix. "You'll know when the time is right." Before they could ask more, he turned back to his maps, as though their part of the conversation had ended. Rye and Felix stepped away, clutching the scroll, the key, and the sense that something dormant had just stirred. They wandered again, but not aimlessly. Felix's mind raced through memories of that summer, the long hikes, the fort they built under the trees, the strange symbols they carved into bark like make-believe rituals. At the time, it had been child's play. But now he wasn't so sure. "Do you remember the trail?" Felix asked. Rye glanced sideways. "You mean the one with the old stone marker?" "Yeah. Kinda." "What if we went back?" Rye stopped walking. "Wait. You want to go to Pine Brook? Today?" Felix nodded. "If we leave by early afternoon, we can get there before dusk." Rye stared at him. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. "You're serious?" "I am." "Well then," Rye said, spinning on his heel. "Guess I'd better go find my ceramic frog fast." They moved through the rest of the market like scavenger kings on a timer. Rye found his frog, a weathered little thing with chipped paint and a charmingly crooked crown, and haggled it down from $15 to $10. Felix picked up a small lantern, brass and glass, that reminded him of the ones they used to hang in the trees. By the time they got back to the van, the sun had climbed high in the sky. They tossed their finds in the back, and Felix unrolled the map once more, smoothing it out on the dashboard. The van rumbled to life. As they pulled out of the lot, Juniper, still at her booth, raised her hand in a slow wave. Felix waved back, and in that moment, he thought he saw her mouth a word. One he couldn't quite hear, but felt, somehow. "Remember?" As the van sped toward Pine Brook and the sun arced overhead, the brass key glinted faintly in the light. The journey had started as a casual visit to a flea market. But now, they were following a forgotten trail. One that might lead to memories lost. Or to something waiting just beyond the veil of the ordinary. Something that had never really left them. Something that might just change everything. Act 4, The Forest That Remembers. The drive to Pine Brook took just under 2 hours, but time passed differently inside the van. The countryside blurred into a watercolor of rolling hills and windswept fields, the kind that made you forget what year it was. Rye had tuned the radio to a station that played jazz from vinyl records, complete with occasional static and the faint hissing of old grooves. Felix sat in the passenger seat, the map spread across his lap, tracing the lines with his fingers as if they were veins to an old heart waiting to beat again. "You think the trail's still there?" Rye asked, eyes on the road. "It has to be," Felix murmured. "Places like that, they don't really disappear. They just sleep." Rye snorted. "You're sounding more and more like Gandalf." Felix cracked a smile but said nothing. His mind was far away in the clearing with the twin fox carvings, the stone marker they once called the gate, the firefly-filled nights when stories felt real and monsters seemed almost friendly. By the time they reached the outskirts of Pine Brook, the sun had started its slow descent. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and the scent of pine grew thick and nostalgic. The van turned onto an old gravel road, barely wide enough for one vehicle, flanked by dense trees on either side. Felix sat up straighter. "This is it." The van rumbled down the path until they reached a familiar clearing, overgrown now, wild with time, but still recognizably theirs. They stepped out, letting the silence of the woods wrap around them. There were no other people. No distant hum of towns. Just birdsong, the creak of trees, and the distant whisper of wind threading through branches. "It hasn't changed much," Rai said softly. "No," Felix agreed. "It hasn't." They made their way toward the old trailhead. It took a few minutes of wandering, parting tall grass and leaves, but there it was, a small, weather-stained stone jutting from the ground, with the faint etching of a circle and a single line through it. The symbol they'd drawn as kids. The symbol from the map. "I can't believe it's still here," Rai whispered. Felix crouched beside it, brushing away leaves and dirt. His fingers found a groove he didn't remember, shaped like a keyhole. He pulled the brass key from his bag. It fit perfectly. When he turned it, there was no click, no mechanical shift. But something did change. The breeze shifted, the leaves around them rustled louder, and the air felt charged like the moment before a thunderstorm or the hush before a great reveal. "Did you feel that?" Rai asked. Felix nodded. "Let's follow the path." They pushed forward into the trees. The trail was faint, more suggestion than path, but it was there. Worn by years and memory. As they walked, the light filtered through the canopy above, turning golden and dreamlike. The underbrush cleared away just enough for two people to walk side by side. "Remember that tree?" Rai pointed at a crooked cedar leaning like it had whispered one too many secrets. Felix laughed. "You swore it was haunted." "It was haunted." It groaned every time the wind blew. They passed the rock ledge where they'd once built a lean-to and the stream where they dared each other to catch frogs. Everything looked smaller now, like a stage after the curtains had closed and the audience had gone home. But it still breathed with something deeper. Something alive. As they crested a hill, they reached the heart of the trail. The circle. It was a clearing, perfectly round, encircled by 7 trees, each older and thicker than the rest, like silent sentinels guarding something sacred. In the center, just like in the map, was a small stone pedestal. Weathered, moss-covered, and undeniably intentional. Felix stepped into the clearing, and the moment he did, the wind stilled. No birds. No leaves rustling. Just silence. He approached the pedestal and saw a shallow indentation shaped like the marble from the box. With trembling fingers, he reached into his bag and took it out. When he placed it in the slot, The clearing shifted. Not physically. Not visibly. But something beneath their feet, beneath their memories, stirred. A shimmer passed through the air, like heat waves on pavement. And for a brief moment, the clearing changed. It was no longer overgrown. The grass was trimmed. A canvas tent stood nearby, glowing with firelight. There was laughter in the air, children's voices, someone strumming a guitar. The sky was rich with stars. It was the summer of their childhood again, alive and intact, layered over the present like a second skin. And they were standing in the middle of it. "What the hell?" Rai whispered, his voice odd. Felix felt something tug at his chest. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. "This place remembers," he said. The vision faded as gently as it came, returning the clearing to its current state, wild, quiet, beautiful in its decay. But something lingered. On the pedestal now sat an envelope. Felix picked it up. On the front, in the same handwriting as the photo's note, were the words, "The first memory is the gate. The second will find you." Inside was a faded Polaroid. This time, it showed a treehouse, one they'd built together, once upon a summer long gone. Rai stared at it, jaw slack. That treehouse burned down. It collapsed in a storm, remember? Felix nodded. Yeah. But maybe the memory didn't. They looked at each other, 1,000 questions sparking between them. But one thing was certain. This was no longer a simple return to childhood nostalgia. This was a breadcrumb trail through time, memory, and maybe even something stranger. And they had only just stepped onto the path. Act 5, The Treehouse of Echoes. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden beams through the dense pine forest as Felix and Rai made their way back to the van. The silence from the clearing still clung to them like mist on their clothes, like a whisper in their bones. Neither spoke as they walked. Each was tangled in thought, unraveling the thread of what they had just seen. The vision, the past layered over the present. The pedestal, the marble, the envelope. The photograph of the treehouse. "I'd almost forgotten it," Rai said finally, breaking the silence as they reached the dirt path. "That summer. The treehouse. We were obsessed with it." Felix nodded. "We called it the Skyfort. You made the flag out of an old t-shirt. I nailed it upside down." They both laughed quietly. "But the thing is," Rai continued, "we only stayed in it for, what, a week. Then the storm came and it collapsed." Felix frowned. "Or, that's what we thought." Rai raised an eyebrow. "You think it didn't collapse?" "I think. Maybe it's still standing. Somewhere. Back at the van, they spread the map across the hood, examining it again in the amber light of evening. Felix traced the line from the clearing to a spot farther east, near the edge of the paper. There, marked in tiny ink, was a hand-drawn tree with the ladder. No label. No notes. Just the symbol. That's it, he said. It has to be. Then let's go, Rye replied, without hesitation. They didn't even start the engine. The van wouldn't fit on the trail anyway. Instead, they grabbed flashlights from the back, packed water, and started hiking deeper into the woods following the map's hidden trail. As they walked, the air grew cooler, denser. The world darkened not with fear, but with anticipation. The forest felt alive. Not menacing, just awake, as if it were watching. I remember this hill, Rye murmured as they ascended a mossy ridge. We used to race up it, thinking we were storming a castle. At the top, the trees parted. And there it was. A tree, taller than any around it, with thick branches like arms outstretched. And near its crown, barely visible in the dusk, stood a shape. The skyfort. Still intact. A wooden platform wrapped around a trunk, small railings, a pulley system with an old rusted bucket, and even the tattered remnants of that upside-down flag, fluttering like a ghost of boyhood past. Felix stood frozen. I don't understand. This shouldn't be here. Rye's voice was low. It can't be. We watched it collapse. They approached slowly. The base ladder was weathered but solid. Felix tested the first rung. It held. Without a word, they began to climb, Felix first, then Rye behind him. The creaking wood groaned under their weight, but didn't fail. When they reached the top, it was like stepping into a memory, but one that had kept going without them. The interior was clean, dustless. Someone or something had kept it preserved. There was a lantern hanging from a beam, old but intact. A tin box sat in the corner, marked T and FHQ in faded permanent marker. Theo and Felix, their old code names. Felix opened the box. Inside were old treasures, bottle caps, a slingshot, a tiny journal with uneven handwriting, and another envelope. This one was heavier. He opened it slowly. Inside was another photograph. It showed them, Felix and Rye, sitting on the edge of the skyfort, legs dangling, waving at the camera. Only, they didn't remember taking it. The background of the photo was different too. The forest looked older. The light was odd. And at the very bottom, scribbled in ink, "Echoes remember what minds forget." What does that mean? Rye whispered. Felix shook his head, staring at the photo. Then something caught his eye, etched into the wall of the skyfort, beneath the slat they had carved initials into years ago. More letters. Newer ones. Key, marble, photo, Echo, next, the mirror. Rai stared. Did we carve that? No, Felix said, breathless. Someone else did. Or maybe, another us. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, a sudden wind shook the branches, and the lantern above them flickered though no candle burned inside it. The sound of a bell echoed in the distance. Once. Then twice. It wasn't threatening. It was a call. They climbed down from the skyfort with reverence, as if leaving a shrine. The forest around them was different now, warmer, almost golden despite the twilight. Back at the clearing below, they noticed something new, a narrow path, one not on the map, leading deeper into the woods. A wooden sign had appeared, weathered and cracked, pointing down the trail. On it, carved in jagged, careful letters, reflections. Felix turned to Rai. The mirror. Next step, Rai said. They didn't speak of going home. There was no thought of dinner or time or phone signal. Only this path. This journey. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just about memory anymore. It was about discovery. Revelation. Maybe even redemption. And they were all in. Act 6, the mirror of what was. The trail beneath their feet felt different. It wasn't just the texture, the soil was softer, the moss thicker, but the very air had changed. It carried the coolness of something ancient, the weight of memory distilled into scent and silence. Crickets had gone quiet. Even the wind had stilled. The wooden sign that marked the trail had pointed them toward reflections, and as they walked, Felix kept replaying the carving they found inside the skyfort. Next, the mirror. He held the photograph from the treehouse in his hand. It still baffled him. A moment neither of them remembered yet clearly them. Clearly there. Do you feel it? Felix asked as they descended the hill. Rai gave a slow nod. Like we're walking into something sacred. Or scripted. They continued forward, deeper into the trees, until they reached a clearing unlike the others. It wasn't wide or circular like the pedestal glade. This one was narrow, sunken almost like a shallow bowl carved into the land, surrounded by dark oaks that leaned inward as though peering down. In the center stood a tall, jagged object draped in faded black cloth. A mirror. Or at least, that's what they assumed. As they approached, Felix noticed the ground was scattered with smooth, flat stones. They weren't natural, they had been placed with intention. Each stone bore a carved word or symbol, worn down by time. Words like truth, guilt, hope, once, never, and again. Rai bent down and touched one labeled regret. What is this place? He murmured. Felix didn't answer. He stepped up to the object at the center and slowly reached for the cloth. With a deep breath, he pulled it away. The mirror was tall, almost 8 feet, and framed by gnarled wood that still bore scraps of bark and leaves. But it wasn't a normal mirror. The surface wasn't glass. It was rippling, like silver water frozen in place. Yet, it reflected. Not perfectly but selectively. Felix saw himself in it, but not as he was now. He saw a younger version of himself around 14 standing beside someone who wasn't right. A girl. Pale hair, sharp eyes, arms crossed, challenging him. They were arguing. Her voice echoed faintly in his ears, though her mouth didn't move. "I told you not to go in there, Felix. You promised." Felix staggered back. "What the hell?" he breathed. Rai stepped up beside him and looked. He saw something else. A garage. A fight. His father, towering and red-faced. Rai yelling back. Then slamming a door, grabbing a duffel bag. Running into the woods. His younger self, eyes blazing and tear-streaked, screaming at the sky. "No one tells me who I am." He turned away from the mirror, face pale. "I never told anyone that," he said. Felix looked at him. "It's not showing us what we remember. It's showing us what we left behind." The mirror shifted again. Now both of them stood in it, older, present versions holding a map, standing in a forest just like this one, staring into the mirror itself. "Wait," Rai pointed at the reflection. "That's right now. That's us now." But then the mirror's image changed again. Now it showed two other versions of them, same clothes, same age, but they looked different. Worn. Haunted. They were walking away from each other, down different paths in a forked trail. And neither looked back. A whisper crawled through the air. "Every journey splits. Only some paths return." The surface of the mirror began to ripple like disturbed water, and suddenly, with a soft sucking sound, the reflection vanished entirely. In its place was a new message etched directly onto the silver surface. "To pass, name the memory you buried." Felix and Rai stared at each other. The silence between them was heavy. It wasn't a puzzle. It was a confession. Felix spoke first. "When I was 13, I broke into the old barn on Dawson Hill. I found that stray dog. I promised I'd come back and take it. I never did. It died there. Alone." The mirror shimmered. Then glowed. Rai stepped forward. "When I left home, I never wrote my sister. She thought I was dead for 3 years. I didn't even call. I was scared she'd tell me to come back. The mirror shimmered again. Then, from its center, a sound emerged, a note, like a glass harp being played in some distant cathedral. And slowly, a door opened in its surface. Not metaphorically. A literal crack appeared down the middle, then slid apart, revealing darkness beyond. A tunnel. Rye blinked. Are we seriously supposed to? Felix didn't hesitate. He stepped through. The darkness wasn't empty. It pulsed faintly with light, dim strands of blue and green like veins running through stone. The air was damp, but not unpleasant. Their footsteps echoed softly. The tunnel sloped downward, curving gently like a spiral. As they walked, the walls began to change. Images flickered on them, not painted, not projected, but alive. Like memories held in stone. There was Felix, age 6, building a sandcastle with a man whose face was half faded. There was Rye, alone in a classroom, drawing foxes in the margin of a test paper. There were scenes they both remembered: campfires, Halloween nights, the time they snuck out to watch a meteor shower. And scenes they didn't. A girl neither remembered, holding both their hands. A cavern with a glowing pool. A voice whispering, "You will forget this. Unless you come back." Felix stopped walking. What if we've done this before? Rye stared at him. Like déjà vu. No. Like a cycle. We find the key. The mirror. The photos. But each time, we forget. Until now. They stood still. Then the tunnel opened. They stepped into a new chamber, a perfectly round room lit from above by a circle of soft moonlight. In the center, a small table. On it, a folded paper. A cassette tape. And a message scrawled on the wall. Listen before the light fades. Act 7, the voice in the cassette. The moonlight spilling through the chamber's ceiling pulsed gently, like the rhythm of a heartbeat or a ticking clock. Shadows clung to the curved stone walls, wrapping the chamber in quiet anticipation. Every surface seemed to hum with meaning, like the very air held its breath. In the center of it all sat a small wooden table. On it, a folded sheet of paper, yellowed with age. A cassette tape. And beside them, an old black portable tape recorder with a cracked play button and a strip of masking tape labeled "For You Both." Felix and Rye exchanged a glance, equal parts dread and curiosity. Felix reached out first. His fingers hovered over the cassette before he carefully picked it up. It was light, worn smooth at the edges, with a faded label on one side, Session 9. "I don't like how that sounds," Rye muttered. "Neither do I," Felix said. "But we're too far in to stop now." He slid the tape into the recorder, pressed down on the sticky play button, and the room filled with the crackling hiss of static. Then a voice. a voice neither of them recognized but somehow knew. If you're hearing this, it means the memory held. At least partially. The voice was low, measured. Male. Mid-30s maybe. It had the careful cadence of someone speaking not just to be heard but to be understood. This isn't the first time. Nor the fifth. We've come this far before. Maybe not you, exactly. But us. Felix leaned in. The voice continued. The key leads to the mirror. The mirror to the path. The path to the gate. You know the sequence now. But here's what we always forget, what gets taken from us every time. There was a pause. A clicking sound, like someone flipping through papers. Her name was Astrid. She was the third. And we broke the cycle when we left her behind. Felix felt his heart lurch. The name echoed deep in his bones, though no memory surfaced. Rai looked at him, wide-eyed. Did he just say Astrid? The tape kept playing. She knew how to anchor us. How to carry what couldn't be remembered. But the cost. Static. Then more words, faint and broken. The clearing, the treehouse, the river where time folds, it's all real. We didn't make it up. We survived it. And then we forgot it. All of it. Another pause. Then a final line. If you want it back, her, the truth, the end, you must go where we ended it last. Look for the tree that bleeds light. The gateway is near. Click. Silence. Felix sat back slowly, pulse hammering in his ears. What the hell did we just hear? Rai asked, voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Felix murmured. But he was telling the truth. I could feel it. Who's Astrid? Why don't we remember her? Felix opened a folded piece of paper beside the tape. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch. 3 figures stood at the edge of a river, 2 boys, and a girl. The boys were clearly Felix and Rai, albeit younger. The girl stood slightly apart, hair blowing in the wind. Her face had no features. Just a silhouette. Beneath the sketch were the words. Return before the veil closes. She waits at the river's edge. Felix's voice trembled. The river? That has to be the next place. Rai stood, pacing slowly. Okay. Let's just step back for a second. This is sounding like something out of a movie. A girl we can't remember. A river where time folds. What does that even mean? I don't know, Felix said. but I'm done running from it. He looked back at the cassette player. He said we'd been here before. Us. Maybe versions of us. Maybe this is a loop. And this time, we're breaking it. Rai looked at the sketch, then at Felix, then back at the swirling patterns etched faintly into the stone walls. They weren't decoration. They were maps, rivers, stars, a constellation shaped like a fox. We don't have a choice, do we? He asked. Felix shook his head. No, he said. We never did. They left the chamber as the moonbeam faded behind them, following the tunnel as it sloped upward once more. It led them to a path neither had seen before, emerging on the opposite side of the forest. A single wooden sign marked the way forward. To the River of Echoes. They hiked for nearly an hour, the forest growing denser, more surreal. Glowing mushrooms clustered at the base of tree trunks. The air shimmered faintly, bending light in soft waves. At one point, Felix could have sworn he saw a deer made entirely of mist standing between the trees, watching them. Rai whispered, "This place, it's like it remembers more than we do." At last, they heard it. Water. Not crashing, not roaring but humming. The trees parted, and there it was. The river. Wide and slow-moving, its surface glittered with stars that weren't reflected from the sky but seemed to live in the water itself. It wound gently through the valley, and on the far bank, half concealed by weeping willows, stood a figure. Felix stopped in his tracks. The girl had long, pale hair. She wore a dress the color of smoke, and her hands were clasped before her. She stood perfectly still. Rai whispered, "That's her. It has to be." Felix stepped forward. The moment his foot touched the river's edge, the stars in the water rippled, and the trees around them shifted, bending toward the river as if bowing. The girl raised her head. Her face was still blurred, unformed, but as Felix stepped closer, something clicked in his chest. Recognition. Painful, sweet, shattering recognition. "I know you," he said, voice cracking. "I don't remember how, but I know you." She spoke for the first time. "You called me back," she said. "Now you must remember why you let me go." Act 8, The River That Remembers the Lost. The river shimmered like a living thread of starlight. Beneath its glassy surface, constellations drifted as if untethered from the sky above, moving with a gentle current that seemed both impossibly slow and immeasurably deep. Felix stood at its edge, the earth soft beneath his shoes. Across the river, the girl Astrid watched him. Though her face remained vague, every part of Felix screamed recognition. Not of her appearance, but of her presence. The way the world seemed to hush around her. The ache in his chest, like remembering a song you once loved but forgot the lyrics to. Rai was silent beside him, eyes wide. Then Astrid spoke again. "You're farther than you've ever been," she said, voice low and resonant like wind through pine. "But the river will not let you pass until you remember." Felix stepped into the water. It was cold but not biting. Instead, it was like plunging into emotion itself. Nostalgia. Longing. Regret. The water clung to his skin, whispering. The stars in the river swirled faster, then faster still. And suddenly, he was somewhere else. A forest clearing, younger, bathed in summer light. A campfire. 3 kids. Himself, a younger Rye, and a girl. Astrid. She laughed as she stirred a pot over the fire, her silver hair braided and pinned with little wooden beads. Her hands moved with confidence, like she belonged there. Felix remembered this. Barely. It had been a fragment, a feeling. But now it was real. "You said we'd always stick together," young Astrid said, voice playful but firm. "You said you'd never forget." Felix the boy version looked away. "I didn't mean to. I just..." "You chose to forget," she said, and the vision cracked. Now a different memory. A stone circle. Nightfall. Astrid clutching a wooden token carved with a fox. "You have to go," she told them. Young Rye's voice cracked. "We can stay. We should stay. If you stay, it resets," Astrid said, eyes glassy. "You'll forget again. But if you leave, you might remember next time." Young Felix looked horrified. "But what about you?" Astrid shook her head. "One of us has to hold the memory. This time, it's me." She placed the token in Felix's hand, kissed his forehead, and stepped back into the stone circle. White light enveloped her, and the memory shattered like glass. Felix gasped, stumbling back into his own body, soaked in river light. He fell to his knees on the riverbank, breathing hard. Rye helped him up. "What did you see?" Felix looked across the water. Astrid stood in the same place. "I remembered," he whispered. "She was one of us." Rye hesitated. "And she stayed behind." Felix nodded slowly. "To hold the truth. So we wouldn't lose it forever." The river rippled and a stone bridge formed. Slowly. Smooth stones rising from beneath the surface, one by one, forming a narrow path of light across the water. "Only those who remember may cross," Astrid said. "And only if they choose to carry the weight of what was forgotten." Felix took a step onto the bridge. Then another. The river hummed beneath him, like a heartbeat inside the earth. Rai followed, quieter than usual. As they reached the center of the bridge, something shimmered above the river, a dome of light. Inside it, flickering like a hologram stitched from starlight, was a memory playing over and over. The three of them, Felix, Rai, Astrid, laughing inside the skyfort. Sharing stories. Planning adventures. Swearing oaths. Then a storm. Astrid standing in the mirror chamber alone, calling their names, screaming. Then silence. Felix clenched his fists. I left her. You didn't know, Rai said. We both forgot. I don't think it was an accident, Felix said. I think the cycle makes us forget on purpose. It wants to keep us spinning. Coming close, but never reaching the end. He looked toward Astrid. I think she broke the pattern. On the far side of the river, the trees opened to reveal a hill. At its peak stood a structure that shimmered, part ruin, part temple, part memory. Its stone arches flickered between realities, revealing glimpses of places they'd seen in dreams, the treehouse, the pedestal, the glowing pool. Astrid stepped forward and gestured toward it. That's the archive, she said. Where it ends. Or begins. What's inside? Rai asked. Everything, she said. But once you enter, there's no going back. Felix turned to Rai. You with me? Rai didn't hesitate. Always. Astrid nodded, and the three of them began the final climb. As they neared the temple-like structure, time seemed to bend. Daylight dimmed, though the sky was clear. The grass rustled with voices. Not eerie, just present. The place was alive. They passed carvings of foxes, trees, stars. Symbols that matched the ones from the map, from the marble, from the mirror. They reached the threshold. A stone door stood before them. Upon it, 3 handprints. One for each of them. Astrid placed hers first. Rai followed. Felix hesitated, then placed his hand down. The door pulsed. Opened. And the light inside was not blinding. It was warm. Welcoming. And filled with every memory they'd ever lost. Act 9, the archive of everything forgotten. The moment the stone door opened, the world changed. Not in a thunderclap or a burst of light, but in a way that bent perception itself. The structure before them seemed to grow and stretch as they stepped through an impossible space, larger on the inside than the forest could have ever contained. They were no longer walking on earth. They were walking through memory. The hallway was vast, arched, and bathed in a light that shifted with emotion, faint hues of gold, silver, lavender. Along the walls, massive glass-like panels shimmered with swirling images. Not mirrors. Not screens. But living moments. Echoes caught in crystal. Each step Felix took sent ripples across the walls, triggering flashes of laughter, tears, and silence. He saw his own face, childhood versions, teenage fragments, faces he'd almost forgotten. He saw Astrid building a miniature ship from leaves and bark. Rye skipping rocks across a lake that shimmered like mercury. Rye turned in slow circles, voice low. What is this place? Astrid, walking just ahead, answered without turning. It's the archive. The place memory goes when it can't live in the world anymore. The place forgotten things wait. Wait for what? Felix asked. For us, she said. For the ones who let them go. They reached a chamber at the end of the corridor. Unlike the rest of the archive, this one was circular, domed, and utterly silent. In the center stood a pedestal. On it rested 3 objects. A fox figurine carved from wood. A notebook with a lock. And a broken compass, its needle spinning slowly. Astrid walked to the pedestal and placed her hand on the notebook. This was mine, she whispered. Where I kept the truth. Felix approached the compass. He picked it up. The moment he touched it, a voice echoed in the chamber. Session 10. Subject, F. Roads. Felix flinched. Response, severance incomplete. Residual bonds remain. Loop predicted to resume within 1 lunar cycle unless root anchor is destroyed. Rye backed away slowly. What the hell is this? Another voice, cold and clinical, replied. Recommendation, memory suppression reinforced. Emotional residue elevated. Subject will not recall Astrid. Temporary rupture of third connection permissible. Monitoring advised. Felix clenched the compass in his fist. They erased her. On purpose. Astrid nodded. They couldn't sever me completely. So they sealed me here. In the archive. Hoping the loop would protect itself. Who's they? Rye asked, voice rising. The ones who built the cycle, she said. I don't know if they're people. Or something older. But they feed on repetition. On forgetting. On us never reaching the end. Felix looked at the figurine, the fox. He remembered carving it. But not why. Then what now? He asked. We've broken the cycle. We've remembered. We found you. Astrid looked up. For the first time, her face came into full focus. She was beautiful but not in a conventional way. Her face was strong, real, shadowed with pain and defiance. Her eyes held stars. "That's not enough," she said. "To truly break the loop, one of us has to carry all of it out. All the memory. All the pain. The others must forget." Felix stepped back. "No. No, we just found each other. We're not letting it go again." "You don't understand," Astrid said gently. "The archive is collapsing. The cycle knows. It's trying to rewrite. You'll wake up tomorrow and it'll be a dream again. Unless someone takes the burden." Rai stepped forward. "Then I'll carry it." Felix turned to him. "What?" "No. I already ran away once," Rai said. "Left everyone. Let her be forgotten. Let you carry it alone. Not again." Astrid shook her head. "It won't work. It has to be someone with a memory tethered to all the fragments. Someone who's touched every point." Her eyes met Felix's. "It has to be you." The room dimmed. The panels along the archive began to shatter, one by one, in slow motion. The walls groaned. Time itself was fraying at the seams. Felix stared at Astrid. "If I do this, what happens to me?" "You'll remember," she said. "Everything. But no one else will. Not Rai. Not even me." Tears stung his eyes. "And you?" "I return to the loop," she said softly. "Until you come back again." He turned to Rai. "Don't make me forget you," Felix said. Rai smiled sadly. "If it means you carry us forward, then forget me. I'll find you again. I always do." Felix walked to the pedestal and placed the compass down. He picked up the notebook and opened it. Inside were all their names. Written in looping, desperate ink. Crossed out. Rewritten. Repeated. Then a blank page. He took the fox figurine and set it on top. And he remembered. Everything. A lifetime of loops. Of finding. Forgetting. Failing. Of Astrid's voice in the dark. Of Rai's laughter before the mirror cracked. He remembered love and loss and the aching hope that one day, they would reach the end. And now, they had. Light consumed the archive. Not violent. Just, final. When Felix opened his eyes, he was sitting on a bench in a quiet flea market. The sun was setting. A river ran nearby. Rai sat beside him, sipping lemonade, pointing at a booth selling vintage compasses. Felix turned and saw a girl with pale hair pass through the crowd. She glanced at him, just for a second, and smiled. Act 10, The World That Waited. The hum of the marketplace returned slowly, like a radio tuning back into signal. Sunlight filtered through rows of canvas tents. The smell of popcorn and fresh-cut flowers drifted in the air. It was familiar, achingly so. Felix sat on a bench beneath the dogwood tree, its pale blossoms swaying gently in the breeze. His fingers trembled around a paper cup of lemonade. The condensation trickled down, unnoticed. Across from him, Rai flipped through a box of vinyl records at a booth marked Nostalgia Audio. He looked completely at ease, like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just crossed a mirror, unraveled a loop, stepped into an archive built of memories. Felix turned his gaze slowly, taking it all in. The same chattering kids. The same woman selling fox-shaped cookies. The same old van parked beneath the oak tree. Time had folded itself back into normalcy. But something was different. He was different. He remembered. When Rai returned to the bench, grinning and holding a rare blues album, Felix met his eyes. There was no spark of recognition. No shared weight. No silent knowing. Just Rai. As he had been before. "How'd you find this spot again?" Rai asked, stretching his legs. Felix hesitated. "I followed a memory." Rai smirked. "Sounds like you." Then his brow furrowed. "Hey, you okay?" Felix smiled faintly. "Yeah. Just a little lost in thought." "Well," Rai said, standing. "Let's get another coffee before we head out. That food truck has the cinnamon waffles you love." "I know," Felix said softly. Rai blinked. "You do?" Felix stood. "You always pick them first." "Every year." Rai tilted his head. "We've only been to this market once." Felix didn't reply. Because Rai wouldn't understand. Not this time. They wandered through the rows again, but Felix felt like a ghost. Everyone moved as they had before. Every booth was exactly where it had been. Time had knitted itself into place with eerie precision. But the weight of what he carried made each step feel like it echoed across two worlds. Then he saw her. At the far end of the path, beneath a patchwork tent stitched from old denim, stood a girl with pale hair. Astrid. Or someone who looked like her. She turned slightly. Their eyes met. And this time, her face was not blurred. Felix approached slowly, Hard thudding. The booth was called the Curio Caravan, just like before. And just like before, Juniper stood behind the table. But she stepped aside as Felix reached the tent's edge, and the girl stepped forward. She wore a necklace with a marble pendant swirling silver inside. Felix stopped in front of her. "Astrid," he whispered. She smiled. "You made it back," she said. "You remembered." Tears welled in his eyes. "But, you were supposed to be gone. You were supposed to fade." "I was," she said. "But you anchored me. When you carried the archive, you changed the story." She reached out and touched his hand. "I'm not whole. Not yet. But I'm here." Felix couldn't speak. He didn't have to. They walked together past booths and people and chatter that didn't see them, not fully. As if the world hadn't caught up to the new thread being spun. Felix could feel time trying to fold around them again, but it wasn't as strong now. "Will Rai ever remember?" he asked. "Maybe," Astrid said. "Memories always find cracks." They sat beneath the same dogwood tree, and she pulled something from her bag, a compass. The same broken one from the archive. But now, the needle had stilled. It pointed north. "It's time," she said. "There's more. Beyond this loop. Beyond these memories." Felix looked around. At the people. At the world he once knew. Then back at her. Will it be like before? "No," Astrid said. "It'll be real." They walked together, leaving the market behind. The noise faded. The path grew quieter. Trees leaned overhead like guardians, letting through dapples of golden light. And up ahead, another trail. Unmarked. Untrodden. New. Felix turned once. Rai stood in the distance, holding a coffee cup, watching them leave. For a moment, just a moment, he smiled. As if he, too, felt something pull. Then he turned away. Felix and Astrid stepped onto the path. Not a loop. Not a cycle. A journey. At last. Forward. Act 11, The Path Between Worlds. The path was different this time. It didn't curve gently like the woodland trails Felix had known his entire life. It didn't follow the rules of topography, or geography, or even logic. Instead, it shifted beneath their feet, sometimes stone, sometimes moss, sometimes mist, responding to thought more than to rain. Astrid walked beside him, quiet but present. The air was crisp, weightless, and humming with unseen currents. Around them, the forest thinned until it no longer resembled a forest at all. Trees stretched into spiraling shapes, their trunks veined with starlight, their branches blooming with leaves made of memory scenes playing out in their veins like living tapestries. Felix could see a boy running in the summer dusk. His own younger self. Laughing. Chasing a firefly. He turned away. "I thought we broke the loop," he said softly. "We did," Astrid replied. "But we're still walking through the borderlands. Between what was and what's waiting." They continued in silence, the world shifting subtly around them. Above, the sky rippled like silk. It wasn't blue or gray or gold, but some unnamed color that shimmered with possibility. Time did not move forward here, it hovered. "This place," Felix whispered, "is it real?" Astrid stopped walking. She turned to him, her eyes luminous. "It's the Echo Veil," she said. "A world formed from what's left behind when cycles end. The archive bled into it. Our memories shaped it. Now it's stabilizing into something new." Felix frowned. "And what are we supposed to do in it?" "Find what was never recorded," she said. "The lost. The forgotten. And the others who almost remembered." They reached a ridge. Below them sprawled a vast valley that shimmered in layers like multiple versions of the same landscape overlaid on top of each other. In one layer, the valley was a desert. In another, a sunlit meadow. In the third, it was night, dotted with firelight and shadows of structures. 3 timelines. Felix asked. 3 fragments, Astrid replied. The Echo Veil has been shaped by more than just us. Others touched the archive before. Some didn't escape. Some are still here. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small device, a compass, but not the broken one from before. This one pulsed with soft violet light and spun slowly in 3 directions at once. Felix stared at it. "That's not a compass." "No," Astrid said. "It's a tether. To help us find them." Felix's stomach tightened. "Them? Who exactly are we looking for?" Astrid hesitated. "People like us. Wanderers. Anchors. But one in particular." She opened her palm. Inside was a folded photograph. Felix's heart nearly stopped. It was wrought. But older. Worn. Hardened. Standing beside a campfire with a fox-shaped pendant around his neck, surrounded by strangers Felix didn't recognize. "This version of him never made it back," Astrid said. "He stayed behind in a dying thread of the archive. But the veil kept it alive, just barely. If we don't reach him, he fades." Felix swallowed hard. "So we're here to bring him home." Astrid nodded. And to end the last loop he's still trapped in. They descended the ridge. The closer they got to the valley, the more fluid the world became. Felix had to focus just to keep his footing as the terrain shifted between hot sand, dewy grass, and icy stone. Don't let your mind drift too far, Astrid warned. The veil responds to memory. If you fall into it, it'll trap you in your strongest thought. What happens if I get stuck? You'll live that memory, she said. Forever. Felix walked in silence after that, clutching the fox pendant she had given him earlier, a symbol of their bond, an anchor in this shifting realm. Then, without warning, the world stilled. They stepped into a place that felt fixed. Campfires flickered in the distance. Tents made of old-world fabric fluttered in an unseen breeze. People moved about quietly, some with glassy eyes, others with faces filled with wonder. But none looked fully present. Astrid whispered, "This is a memory settlement. A refuge for those caught between realities." They were all part of failed loops. Felix approached a woman sitting alone near a lantern. She looked up slowly, eyes cloudy. "I dreamed of the ocean once," she said. "But I never reached it." Felix wanted to speak, but couldn't. This was not his memory. Not his place. They continued deeper into the settlement until they saw a figure by a fire pit, sharpening a blade that shimmered with mirrored steel. He stood slowly. Older. Taller. Eyes shadowed. It was Rot. But this version of him was different. Wary. Tense. And when his gaze locked onto Felix and Astrid, he did not smile. He raised the blade instead. "Another trick of the veil?" he asked, voice like gravel. "It's really us," Astrid said calmly. He tilted his head. "Prove it." Felix stepped forward. "You used to tell me I snored like a dying crow after eating 3 burritos." The blade lowered slightly. Felix smiled faintly. "You were wrong. It was 2 burritos." Older Rye blinked. Then, achingly slowly he sheathed the blade. "Damn," he murmured. "You came back." Astrid exhaled. "We need you to remember. And come with us." The veil's collapsing threads. "If you stay here, you'll fracture completely." Older Rye looked at the people in the settlement. "At least here, no one forgets me." "But they don't know you either," Felix said. "And this isn't living. This is floating." A long pause. Then Rye looked at the fire and whispered, "I'm tired of floating." As they prepared to leave, the world began to shift again. The veil sensed the anchor breaking. Lights flared. Memories screamed. And ahead down a newly formed path of blue fire stood something enormous. Watching. The veil's guardian. The cycle's last defense. Astrid turned to them. If we're going to reach the world beyond, we'll have to go through that. Felix grinned, heart pounding. Then let's do what we always do. Run headfirst into the unknown. Rai asked. Felix nodded. Exactly. Act 12, The Guardian of the Veil. The path of blue fire crackled beneath their feet as they stepped forward, the veil shifting behind them like a living storm. Reality twisted in slow spirals, sky folding into earth, gravity bending with the weight of memory. Felix could feel the pulse of something vast just ahead. Not a place. Not a person. But a presence. The air thickened with expectation as the three of them advanced, Felix, Astrid, and Rai, each carrying fragments of memory, loss, and truth. Behind them, the memory settlement began to fade, its inhabitants slowly dissolving into light, their stories written into the fabric of the veil itself. They were the last. The final ones to remember. And something was waiting. They emerged into a clearing like no other, a space suspended in the void. There was no sky. No ground. Only the edge of a massive, circular platform floating in darkness. Stars moved in spirals around them, yet far too close, like the galaxy had bent inward to observe. At the center of the platform stood a monolith of obsidian, towering and seamless. It pulsed once, then cracked open. What stepped forward was not a creature in any earthly sense, but a shifting shape made of glass and shadow, its limbs formed from fragments of forgotten lives, its face a mirror that reflected only the parts of you wanted to forget. Felix flinched as he saw his own reflection, but not his current self. He saw the version of himself who left Astrid behind, who chose to forget, who ran from every truth until it was too late. The guardian spoke not with words, but with thought. This is where you stop. The cycle requires a center. You will become that center. Rai stepped forward. He already broke the loop. You can't restart it. All things must repeat, the voice echoed. Unless paid for. Astrid's eyes narrowed. We did pay. With time. With memory. With loss. Not enough, came the cold reply. One must remain. The others may pass. A silence fell between them. Rai growled. Always the same damn rule. Felix looked at the guardian. Why does someone have to stay? To anchor the new thread, the voice replied. Without an anchor, it unravels. Felix turned to Astrid and Rai. Then I'll do it. Astrid snapped her gaze to him. No. You said it yourself, he said. I'm the one who's touched every part of the archive. I carried it. I remembered it all. I can keep it together. Rai shook his head. Not again. Not this time. Rai. No. His voice cracked. You've carried everything for everyone. Let me do this. I'm the version that stayed too long. Let me matter. But Astrid said nothing. She stepped forward, her voice soft but unbreakable. I will stay. Both men froze. Astrid's eyes shimmered not with fear, but clarity. I was the one who held the cycle in place last time. I was built to carry memory. I was the seed the loop planted to protect itself. If I stay this time, not as a prisoner but by choice, the cycle ends on our terms. Felix's voice wavered. But you'll forget everything. Astrid smiled. Or maybe I won't. Maybe this time I'll leave a trace. The guardian pulsed again. It did not resist. It merely watched. Waiting. Astrid turned to Felix, placed her hand on his chest. You carry the truth now, she said. Make sure the next world knows it. Then to Rai. You carry the spark. Keep it burning. She stepped into the center of the platform. Light engulfed her. And slowly, the veil began to collapse, folding inward like a paper lantern consumed by fire. Felix reached out instinctively, but it was too late. Astrid was gone. Not erased, but written into the walls of time itself. A doorway appeared behind them. Framed in silver, shaped like a spiral, rippling with soft winds from a world beyond. The true world. Felix and Rai stepped toward it. Felix turned one last time, hoping, praying to see her one more moment. But the platform was empty. The guardian had vanished. The veil was stilling. And all that remained was them. They crossed the threshold. Light folded inward, then outward, and the world returned. Felix blinked against the morning sun. He stood at the edge of a field overlooking a wide, glimmering river. The grass was damp with dew. Birds sang somewhere nearby. Beside him, Rai stretched, groaning. Okay. I think I still remember how coffee works. They looked around. The air was light. Free. Whole. Felix reached into his pocket. A fox pendant. Still warm. And when he looked at the water, For just a heartbeat, he saw her reflection, smiling. And in that moment, he knew. This was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new world. One they could finally call their own. Act 13, The Signal in the River. The morning mist clung low to the fields, blanketing the earth in soft silver. Felix stood at the edge of the river, the same one he and Rai had awoken beside after crossing the vale. It had been 2 weeks. 2 weeks of normalcy. 2 weeks of a world that felt whole. No shifting ground beneath his feet. No mirror-faced guardians. No whispered riddles. But also no Astrid. And yet, she was everywhere. In the way the wind stirred the leaves just before sunrise. In the shimmer of light on the water. In the flicker of something just out of sight, like a thread from a dream that refused to be tucked away. Rai had returned to his rhythms, working in a nearby village, repairing watches and old radios. Felix wandered. Wrote. Waited. And today he felt it. Not just nostalgia. Not memory. A pulse. The river's current shifted, just enough to catch his attention. He knelt. And there, caught against a stone, was a ribbon. Blue silk. Twisting slowly in the water, glimmering faintly with specks of silver. His breath caught in his throat. He knew that ribbon. He had seen it in Astrid's hair 100 lifetimes ago. Felix reached out and lifted it free. The moment his fingers closed around the fabric, the world around him wavered. He wasn't standing by the river anymore. He was in a corridor, stone, arched, flickering with candlelight. The archive. But not the broken, fading archive they had escaped. This version was alive. Strong. And somewhere deep within it, he felt her. Astrid. He took a step forward, but before he could move farther, the vision shattered, flinging him back into the waking world. He gasped, falling to one knee on the riverbank. The ribbon lay in his hand. Unchanged. But now he knew. Astrid had left something behind. More than just a memory. She had left a trace. That night, Felix sat across from Rai in the small stone cottage they now shared. The fireplace crackled softly, and a kettle whistled in the background. Rai was polishing a watch, his fingers nimble and careful. "You ever wonder," Felix said suddenly, "if this place is too perfect?" Rai didn't look up. "All the time." Felix blinked. "Really?" Rai sighed. "We crossed a realm of memory storms and walking mirrors, and now we're in some pastoral paradise with hand-delivered scones and no taxes. Yet, I've been suspicious since day one." Felix smirked. "Why didn't you say anything?" Rai shrugged. You seemed happy. Or at least peaceful. And I didn't want to yank the curtain back until you were ready. Felix pulled the ribbon from his pocket and placed it on the table. Rye froze. No way. I found it in the river. It's hers, isn't it? Felix nodded. And that's not all. When I touched it, I saw the archive again. It's still there. Alive. Rye looked up at him, suddenly serious. Are you saying she's still there? Not exactly, Felix said. But something of her is. I don't think the veil erased her. I think she buried herself in the architecture. Left echoes. Signals. Like breadcrumbs. Like a beacon, Felix whispered. Waiting to be decoded. They returned to the river the next morning. Felix wore the ribbon tied around his wrist. The closer they got to the water, the stronger the pull became. Not a sound. Not a light. But a gravity. They followed it upstream, past willow trees and half-forgotten trails, until they reached a hollow where the water split around a mossy island. In the center of that island was something impossible. A radio tower. Old. Rusting. But humming. It stood no more than 20 feet tall, its base tangled in roots and ivy. Its wires led to a single transmitter box, one that was powered, despite no visible source of electricity. Okay, this is officially weird, Rye muttered. Felix stepped forward, drawn by something deeper than logic. The transmitter flickered. Then it spoke. Not in words. In a hum. A melody. Simple. 5 notes. Da-da-da-da-da. Felix staggered back. I know that tune, he whispered. So do I, Rye said slowly. She used to whistle it while we hiked. Felix knelt beside the transmitter. There, burned faintly into the metal casing, was a symbol. A fox. She left a map, Felix said. Not in ink. In resonance. In frequencies. He stood, heart pounding. She's calling us. Rye placed a hand on the tower, eyes closed. She's not gone. No, Felix said. She's ahead of us. And in that moment, the river behind them rippled unnaturally. A glowing silver path emerged across the water, floating stones, etched with symbols neither of them could yet read. But Felix knew what they meant. They were coordinates. The next step. A new trail. And just like before, they would follow. Act 14, the frequency of Astrid. The floating stones glowed faintly under Felix's boots as he stepped out across the river. Each one thrummed beneath him, a quiet vibration that settled into his bones like the low hum of a deep cello. Behind him, Rai followed, cautiously, his usual sarcasm silenced by the sheer weight of the moment. They weren't walking into the forest anymore. They were stepping through it. The silver path twisted through trees that no longer behaved like trees. Branches curled into spirals, leaves shaped like eyes and stars and unfamiliar constellations. The sky above them flickered like an old reel of film, skipping between day, dusk, and something else entirely. And all the while, that five-note melody echoed through the air. Da-da-da-da-da. Sometimes it was a whistle carried on the wind. Other times, a vibration in the soil. But always it was pulling them forward. "She's weaving the trail," Felix murmured. "One signal at a time." Rai adjusted the bag slung over his shoulder, where they had packed the transmitter device. "I hope this breadcrumb trail doesn't lead into another archive. I'm all looped out." Felix gave a half smile, but didn't respond. His focus was locked on the space ahead, on the frequency dancing just beyond perception. After what felt like hours but could have been minutes, they reached a clearing. At its center was a structure unlike anything they had seen. It wasn't built. It had grown a dome of crystallized light, threaded with vines that hummed gently as if alive. Pulses of violet and blue shimmered across its surface in time with the melody. Felix stepped closer. At the base of the dome was a small panel embedded in the root-like tendrils. 5 round pads like buttons on an ancient instrument. Each one etched with symbols that vibrated faintly when he moved his hand near them. He didn't have to ask what to do. He placed his fingers on the pads and tapped out the melody. Da. 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 The dome responded instantly. Light spiraled inward. The vines retracted. And a doorway opened. Inside was silence. They entered slowly. The air was thick, not with dust, but with feeling layers upon layers of emotional residue, like music that had been playing so long it became the room itself. The chamber inside was circular, with smooth walls that glowed with shifting constellations. But not ones from the sky, they were made of moments. Little memories, tiny fragments hovering in motion like fireflies. A fox figurine passed from one hand to another. A lantern lit in the middle of a storm. A ribbon tied around a braid. A goodbye. Rai touched the air near one memory and it flickered, becoming a vision of Astrid standing on the edge of a cliff, hair whipping around her face, staring out over a sea made entirely of memory. She whispered something, but no sound came. "She encoded herself here," Felix said softly. "Not in words. Not in form. In frequency. In fragments. Each memory a broadcast." Rai looked at him. "So how do we Tune in. Felix turned to the center of the room. A pedestal waited. On it, a headset. Not electronic, more like a circlet woven from crystal and root. It pulsed faintly with her signal. Felix reached for it. Wait, Rai said. You don't know what it'll do. Felix nodded. I do. It'll let me hear her. The moment the circlet touched his head, the chamber disappeared. He was no longer standing. He was floating. Drifting through waves of sound notes, words, half-formed thoughts. Then, her voice. Felix. He turned in the void. A shape coalesced before him. Not fully solid, not ghostly either. Just her. Formed from light and memory and music. You found me. He wanted to speak. But the sound would break her. So he only listened. This isn't a message, she said. It's me. What I could save. What I could shape before I disappeared. I knew the veil wouldn't let me cross with you. But I hoped, if you made it, if you remembered enough. She stepped forward. And reached for his face. He felt it, not cold, not warm. Just real. There's more. Beyond this. A signal I couldn't reach alone. There are others. Lost threads. Abandoned stories. They've been trying to speak. To escape. But they need a conductor. Someone to carry the frequency forward. Felix whispered, "You want me to become the transmitter?" Astrid smiled. "No. I want you to become the voice." Suddenly, images rushed through him. People trapped in half-formed loops. A girl caught in a repeating summer. A boy who never aged, reliving a birthday party forever. A painter stuck between the first brush stroke and the last. So many stories. So many echoes. Waiting. For someone to speak them into being. The circlet slipped off. Felix staggered. Rai caught him. What happened? She's alive, Felix whispered. In signal. In this structure. And she's not the only one. He turned to the wall of memories. They're calling. All of them. Every story the veil tried to erase. Rai looked around slowly. Then I guess we're not done yet. No, Felix said. Now, we begin. Outside the dome, the sky had shifted. Above them, the stars had rearranged themselves into a symbol. A spiral of light. At the center, A fox. Act 15, The Story Keepers. The dome of crystal and vine faded into the twilight behind them. Felix and Rye now stood at the edge of a wide, rippling plain, the sky above etched with stars in patterns neither of them recognized. And at the very center of the heavens, the fox spiral remained, pulsing like a heartbeat in the cosmos. Rye slung the pack of salvaged signal devices over his shoulder. So, story keepers, huh? Sounds like a dramatic promotion. Felix gave a small smile, but didn't answer. His eyes were on the path ahead, one that hadn't existed yesterday. Where the signal had once led them to Astrid's trace, it now led deeper towards something larger. The wind around them carried more than air. It carried whispers. Not words, but impressions. Emotions. Names that had been lost. Places that had never been mapped. "We're not in a world anymore," Felix finally said. "We're in a memory field." Rye furrowed his brow. "Come again." "This isn't a world with memory inside it. It's made of memory. It's like a backup drive for everything the veil tried to erase. Like a cosmic junkyard of forgotten people." Felix nodded. "And it's trying to reassemble itself." The farther they walked, the more real the land became. Where the plains had been haze and suggestion, they now took form: hills with names, ruins with story, statues half sunk in the earth with plagues that read like unfinished fairy tales. They stopped at one such statue, weather-worn and twisted into a spiral of vines. It showed a woman mid-laugh, her hand extended towards someone who was no longer there. At her feet, a message. Myra of the Seven Sons. Last seen dancing under the archive sky. Her ending unwritten. Rye knelt. "You think this was real?" Felix crouched beside him, touching the base. A pulse echoed through him. And suddenly, he saw her. A flicker. Myra, running barefoot across glowing sand. Laughing. A city of glass behind her. Stars falling. And then gone. Just like that. Felix reeled back. "She's one of them," he whispered. "A ghost of a story that never got told. She's here waiting." Rye stood, dusting his hands. "Well then," he said. "We better start writing." They traveled for 3 more days across the memory field. Each night, they camped beneath trees that hummed with dream light. And each morning, they found more fragments. A journal with no ending. A song that looped the same verse forever. A map where one city had been erased, replaced by a smear of static. And every time Felix touched one of these relics, the memory it held sparked to life around them briefly, painfully. And then faded again. They were becoming the keepers, yes. But also the connectors. On the fourth day, they reached the edge of the plains. There, nestled in a shallow canyon, was the impossible. A city. Not one made of stone or wood but of story. Its buildings shimmered with unfinished architecture, some rooms fully formed, others fading in and out like thoughts on the brink of forgetting. At its center stood a tower. Glass and light and shifting geometry. From its peak, a signal pulsed. Not Astrid's. Something else. Older. Inside the tower, they found a chamber lined with glowing memory strands like books pulled apart and rewoven into luminous threads. In the center stood a being not quite human, not quite light. Its form changed as they looked at it, as if its appearance depended on their own expectations. "Welcome," it said, its voice a dozen tones in harmony. "You've come far." Felix stepped forward. "What is this place?" "This is the convergence," the being said. "Where all unfinished stories gather. Where all forgotten endings wait." "And you?" Rai asked. "I am the scribe," the being replied. "The first who tried to remember everything. I failed. But my remnants built this place." Felix felt the fox pendant grow warm against his chest. "There are others like us," he said. "Yes," the scribe nodded. "Story keepers. Echo speakers. Archive survivors. But few remember long enough to find the convergence." Rai crossed his arms. "Then what now?" "We build a library of ghosts." The scribe smiled. "You bring them back. You give them shape. You finish their tales." Felix looked around the chamber, awestruck. "Even Astrid's." The scribe turned and revealed something behind them. A wall of strands. But one pulsed brighter than the rest. It bore her frequency. "Astrid." Felix stepped closer. "This one is still active," the scribe said. "But fragile. She's not a memory. She's a signal with a heart." Rai exhaled slowly. "She's still fighting." Felix nodded. "Then we have to fight too." The scribe lifted a hand. From the floor rose a table, on it, tools. Not weapons. Pens. Recorders. Instruments. "Create," the scribe said. "Not from scratch, but from what remains." And suddenly, Felix understood. They weren't just saving stories. They were completing them. Rewriting endings that had been stolen. Giving voice to the voiceless. Hope to the forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, a way back for Astrid. That night, under a sky stitched with memory constellations, Felix lit a lantern made from the archive's light. He placed his hand to the page and began to write. Act 16, the first story they save. The room flickered with living strands of memory. Some twisted like vines, glowing faintly with hues of emerald and amethyst. Others sparked erratically, straining to stay cohesive. All of them whispered, not in words, but in feelings: longing, grief, joy suspended in time. Felix sat at the stone desk inside the Tower of Convergence. Before him lay a page formed from woven strands, memory fiber, as the scribe called it. It shimmered faintly, waiting to receive something true. He hesitated. "You all right?" Rai asked, sitting cross-legged nearby. He was fiddling with the recorder, one of the archive devices they tuned to detect emotional resonance. Felix nodded. Just choosing. There were thousands of stories around them, but one shone brighter than the others, twisting gently above the desk like a comet made of memory. The name, Myra of the Seven Sons. He remembered the statue, the joy on her face, the word unfinished carved beneath her feet. "This is the one," Felix said. "She's still calling." With the scribe's guidance, they connected the strand to the desk's channel. Instantly, a vision bloomed around them. Myra's world came alive. A desert city made of sun sails and sandstone, with floating bridges and towers shaped like seashells. The sky had 7 suns, each a different color, each with its own cycle. And in the center of that world was Myra. A girl with braids full of stardust and a voice that made people pause mid-step. She was laughing, always laughing, running across rooftops, writing poems in the dust, daring the winds to carry her farther than anyone had gone before. But the vision began to fray. Like film burning. Felix saw it happen, her world flickering, the people turning hollow, the city crumbling into shards of light. She stood at the edge of a broken sun bridge, reaching out to someone. And then it stopped. That was where the memory had ended. Where the loop, the archive, or time itself had cut her off. Felix gripped the stylus made of archive silver. She didn't get an ending. Rai looked up. "So write her one." Felix hesitated. "What if I get it wrong?" "You won't," Rai said. "You're not inventing. You're listening." And so he did. He listened. He closed his eyes, placed his hand over the glowing thread, and let the echo of Myra's spirit guide him. He began to write. Myra stood beneath the final sun kralin, the violet one, its light cool against her cheek. Behind her, the city whispered with glass wind, its towers cracked but not fallen. Not yet. She knew the bridge would collapse soon. The damage the ripped storm had done wasn't just to stone, it was to memory. And once forgotten, a place could not be recovered. But she had one chance left. One thread left. She placed her fox-carved pendant against the beacon crystal. The same pendant Astrid had once worn. The same signal Felix had followed. And then she did the thing no one else dared. She sang. The note wasn't perfect. It was cracked and raw and real. But it reached. It reached the other side. And somewhere, on a different world, a boy opened his eyes. When Felix finished writing, the thread glowed brighter than ever before. The memory shifted. The vision changed. This time, Myra didn't fall. She flew. Wings of starlight burst from her back, formed by sound and love and every word Felix had just written. She crossed the collapsing bridge. Landed on the other side. And was met. Not by strangers. But by Rye. Not the Rye standing beside Felix now, but an echo of another him. A version who had found her. Together, they turned. And smiled. The memory solidified. No longer flickering. The story had become stable. Felix pulled back, blinking tears from his eyes. Across the chamber, the statue of Myra, the same one they'd seen in the memory planes, flashed. Then changed. Now, beneath her feet, the words had shifted. Myra of the Seven Sons. Dared the fall. Found the bridge. Remembered. Rye exhaled. We did it. Felix whispered, no. She did it. We just wrote her back into the world. The scribe appeared, rippling with a new kind of light. You've passed the threshold, it said. One saved thread creates a root. Enough roots will give this world form. Felix looked around the chamber, now humming with a low song. What happens when we save enough? He asked. The scribe smiled, an expression not of mouth, but of energy. The convergence becomes reality. No longer memory. No longer lost. And Astrid? Rye asked. The scribe's tone softened. She is still calling. But now, she is not alone. Felix stood. Then let's keep writing. Outside, the first true dawn in this world broke across the sky. It wasn't made of memory anymore. It was made of hope. And light. And the first completed story. Act 17, The Whispering Staircase. It began with a dream. Felix found himself standing at the base of an impossibly tall staircase, its steps made not of stone or wood, but of pages. Thousands of them. Some blank. Some blood-stained. Others etched with tiny handwriting that writhed when looked at too closely. The staircase spiraled into the dark, vanishing into an unseen apex. But what haunted Felix most wasn't the height. It was the sound. Whispers. Dozens of voices, layered, all speaking in tones too quiet to parse but too desperate to ignore. They weren't menacing. They were pleading. He stepped toward the first page step. And immediately, he woke. Morning broke slowly through the frost-hazed windows of the Tower of Convergence. Felix sat upright in his cot, sweat dampening the back of his neck. He turned to Rye, still snoring under a half-thrown blanket. "Rye," Felix said softly. "Wake up." Rye groaned. "Ugh. If this is about another glowing statue with tragic poetry, I swear I'm sleeping till next week." "I heard it," Felix said. "A staircase. Whispers. Pages as steps." That made Rye sit up. "What?" Felix got up and moved to the wall where the scribe's archive strands pulsed faintly. He scanned the matrix for symbols. None matched a staircase, but then it flickered. A single strand emerged, bright and unruly. Instead of a name, it bore only one glyph. Cyclone. The spiral. But below it, in language neither of them recognized, were scratched words that felt like they had been translated from emotion itself. The story that refused to end. Rye stepped closer. "That sounds unsafe." Felix touched the glyph. The strand shivered. And immediately, a part of the wall peeled open. Behind it, darkness. A tunnel. A signal. Calling. They followed the passage into the lower levels of the convergence, a place they hadn't been shown before. The air grew colder. The light thinner. And then, at last, they found it. The staircase. Just as in Felix's dream. Massive. Spiral. Infinite. Each step still a page. And the whispers real. Felix paused at the threshold. Rye swallowed. "Do we have a plan?" "Nope." "Great. Love that." And with that, they climbed. Each step they took sent a shudder through the staircase. And with every turn, the whispers grew louder. Some were names. Others were phrases cut mid-sentence. And then I told him I would never forget the sound of the. She left her shoes at the. Unfinished. Untold. Unresolved. The spiral pulled them upward, not physically, but emotionally. Like each step dragged a piece of their own memories loose. Felix saw flashes. His mother's voice, laughing at a birthday cake. A storm in a town he couldn't place. A red umbrella spinning down a flooded street. Rye gripped the railing made of old quills and tangled thread and hissed, "It's trying to use our memories to finish itself." Felix nodded. "It's a story with no core. It pulls from anything nearby. Like a black hole of narrative." "Exactly." They reached a landing. In the center stood a desk. At it, a boy. Or rather, the ghost of a boy, his body faded, like smoke caught in sunlight. He was writing. Furiously. But every time he reached the end of a page, the ink bled away. He turned to them with wide, desperate eyes. "Can you finish it?" he asked. Felix stepped forward. "What happened to you?" "I was a storyteller," the boy said. "But I began something too big. Too tangled. I wrote myself into it. And when I died, the story stayed alive. But it wouldn't end." Rye muttered, "So the story kept whispering." The boy nodded. "It climbs. Every day. Hoping someone will finish it. But no one can." Felix walked around the desk. The pages were countless names, wars, prophecies, love stories. Unfinished arcs. Unwritten closures. A kingdom trapped in year 3 of a siege. A girl waiting for a letter that never came. A beast searching for the child it once was. Rye put a hand on Felix's shoulder. "Don't try to write it all," he said. "That's not the point." Felix looked at the boy. "What is the point?" The boy whispered. "To let it go." They climbed one last turn. At the top was a door. But it was sealed with no handle. Etched into it. "This story ends when you stop trying to control it." Felix stared. Then he understood. He sat on the step. Pulled out the silver stylus. And wrote only 3 words. "It is enough." The staircase shuddered. The whispers slowed. The pages folded. And then, silence. The door opened. Behind it, light. And for a single moment, Felix saw the boy again, now solid, smiling. Free. Back in the tower, the page strand labeled with the spiral glyph dimmed. Then flared. And was renamed. The Whispering Staircase. Freed by Felix and Rye. Rye let out a breath. That was a lot for a morning stroll. Felix smiled, voice hoarse. It was worth it. Act 18, when Astrid speaks again. 3 days had passed since the Whispering Staircase fell silent. Felix and Rai had returned to the Tower of Convergence, where the strands of memory now pulsed brighter than ever. With each saved story, the world around them stabilized. Structures that once flickered now stood firm, pathways stayed fixed, and time no longer slipped between breaths. The scribe had told them, every completed thread strengthens the foundation. Each ending becomes an anchor. But even with this progress, Astrid had not returned. Her signal, her melody had vanished after the first dome was awakened. Felix visited the site every evening. No whispers. No pulses. Only wind and silence. Until the fourth night. It began as a low vibration beneath the roots of the dome. Felix stood alone in the dark, the fox pendant cold against his chest. He was about to turn back when the earth itself hummed. Soft. Steady. Like a heartbeat returning. Then the air rippled. And he heard it. Astrid's voice. Not a whisper. Not a recording. But alive. Felix. He turned, breath stolen. The dome was glowing again, but this time its color was different, less silver, more crimson gold, like sunset through stained glass. He stepped closer. Inside the chamber, her signal was weaving itself anew, not from memory strands, but from new material. Data that hadn't existed before. A live broadcast. Felix fell to his knees. I don't know how long I can hold this, her voice said, fragmented. But I'm close. So close. You're doing it. You're riding the world awake. And I. Static. Found something. Or someone. Another me. I think. I'm split. The dome shook. Felix stood quickly, pressing his palm to the console. Astrid. Silence. Then. You have to come deeper. Where the signals cross. Where memory bleeds into root code. I can't reach you from here. But if you come to the folded lake, I think we can reunite. The transmission cut. The dome fell dark again. But this time, it wasn't grief that filled Felix's chest. It was urgency. Rai was already awake when Felix returned. I felt it, he said. She spoke, didn't she? Felix nodded, breathless. She's alive. But fractured. She found another version of herself. Rai's face went pale. Another Astrid. Felix looked out the window, toward the dawn breaking over the plains. She split across the signal lines. Between memory and reconstruction. The only place where that can happen. Is at a fold, Rye finished. Where the story wrote over itself. The folded lake, Felix confirmed. That's where she said to go. Rye stared at him. That place wasn't even on the map last week. It didn't exist until we saved enough. They left at first light. The journey was different now. The world no longer felt like wandering a maze of half-built fragments. It felt like walking through the bones of something awakening. They passed a grove of whispering statues, all of them lit from within, names carved beneath their feet now glowing steady. Felix paused at one, the girl who refused to fade. He placed a hand over her name. She was the first, he said. But not the last. Rye looked around. You ever wonder if all this rebuilding, it's not just about saving others? Felix met his eyes. You mean? Maybe it's about saving her. Rye nodded. And maybe you too. By midday, they reached the folded lake. It wasn't a lake in the normal sense. It was a vast basin of liquid memory, silver, shifting, and filled with voices. The surface reflected not the sky, but different moments in time. Felix saw versions of himself flicker across the lake's ripples, laughing, crying, falling, rising. And at the center of the lake, a tower, twisted, mirrored, bleeding light. The signal nexus, Rye whispered. Where all the versions meet. Felix felt the fox pendant grow warm. He stepped toward the water. And it parted. The walk across the lake was surreal, footsteps sending ripples that shifted reality itself. The air grew heavy. Felix heard fragments of Astrid's voice, not from above or around but from within him. You left me behind, but I understood. You found me, but I wasn't whole. You called me back, but I came fractured. He reached the base of the tower and saw her. Not Astrid as he remembered, but two Astrids. One cloaked in golden light, kind, soft, the voice that guided him. The other in shadow, sharp-eyed, guarded, powerful. Two halves of the same soul. Both fading. Golden Astrid spoke first. When I stayed behind, I split myself. A part to guide. A part to protect. Shadow Astrid stepped forward. I kept the archive from collapsing. Held back the reloop. But the cost. They both looked at Felix. You have to choose, they said in unison. Which version lives? Felix's heart shattered. No. You must, the Golden One said. One Astrid cannot hold two frequencies. But I love both, Felix said. The part that remembers, and the part that fights. Rai stood silent behind him. Shadow Astrid spoke. Then let us decide. And they stepped together. Merged. Screamed. Light burst. Felix was thrown back, blinded. When he opened his eyes, Astrid stood alone. Whole. But different. Her hair shimmered like dusk and dawn. Her eyes held joy and steel. Her voice, when she spoke, echoed with every version of herself. Thank you for finding me. And for the first time, Felix didn't feel like a story was ending. He felt like one had finally begun. Act 19, The Weaving of the New World. The folded lake shimmered behind them like the last page of a long-forgotten book. Astrid stood at the center of the signal nexus, her form now whole, her presence undeniably real. No longer a memory, no longer a trace. Her body carried both softness and steel, like a story told twice, once as a lullaby, and again as a war cry. Felix reached out and touched her hand. It was warm. No ripple. No static. Just her. Rai stood beside them, his usual sarcasm traded for something quiet, reverent. We did it, Felix whispered. Astrid looked around at the lake, at the tower behind them, at the sky beginning to shift in color from memory-streaked silver to vibrant reality. No, she said softly. We started it. Back at the Tower of Convergence, the scribe waited. It looked different now, less ethereal, more defined. The scribe's form was no longer shifting. Its face had taken a shape Felix recognized faintly, as if it had borrowed elements from everyone they had saved. You've awakened a core thread, the scribe said. Astrid's signal was the last of the anchor points. Astrid stepped forward. Then the world is stable. Not yet, the scribe replied. It's ready. But now it needs to be woven. Rai folded his arms. Woven how? I don't see a loom lying around. The scribe turned, and the chamber changed. The floor dissolved into stars. The walls folded into horizon lines. And before them appeared a massive web of radiant light like constellations strung together by memory strands. The world you knew, the scribe said, was built on repetition. Loops. Archives. Fragments. This one, Astrid whispered, will be built from intention. The scribe nodded. You will be the weavers. The first. You decide what remains. What fades. What becomes possible. Felix looked up at the massive lattice of light and story. Each strand vibrated with potential. Some represented people they'd already saved: Myra of the Seven Sons, the ghost boy of the Whispering Staircase, the girl who refused to fade. but others pulsed in and out like unborn stars, waiting to be called into shape. What if we mess up? Felix asked. Astrid squeezed his hand. Then we revise. Rai stepped forward. Where do we start? The scribe extended a hand. 3 threads unraveled from the web glowing red, blue, and green. Each of you will choose one theme, it said. A foundation. The red strand pulsed with conflict, survival, and renewal. The blue shimmered with memory, healing, and connection. The green glowed with curiosity, discovery, and the unknown. Felix reached for blue. Astrid touched green. Rai, with a grin, grabbed red. The threads leapt into the air and bound together, weaving a tri-helix of shimmering code. The web around them responded. Lights flared. Constellations rewrote themselves. And then the tower cracked. Not in collapse. In birth. It unfolded upward like a blooming tree made of time. Branches of light extended across the skies, touching every edge of the convergence. The sky rumbled. The world shifted. And something incredible happened. People returned. From far corners of half-worlds, from whispering fields and broken archives, they came. Not as ghosts. Not as echoes. But alive. Writers. Dreamers. Keepers of forgotten songs. A city formed around the tower. Not built with stone, but with stories. Bridges of shared dreams. Libraries that breathed and responded to emotion. Rivers made of unfinished lullabies, finally sung to completion. And at the center of it all, stood the 3 weavers. Weeks passed. Then months. Together, Felix, Astrid, and Rai traveled the land helping stories unfold, guiding storytellers, healing those fractured by the old loops. Every night, Astrid would sit beside a pool of glass and listen to new signals, not cries for help, but voices wanting to begin. One night, under the glow of a new constellation, 3 stars wound into a fox spiral. Felix stood before a crowd in the grand circle of echo. And he spoke. This world isn't perfect. It wasn't built that way. But it is honest. And for the first time, it belongs to us. Not to loops. Not to archives. But to the ones brave enough to remember and imagine. Astrid took his hand. Rai raised a toast. And the stars shimmered their approval. Later, alone on a hill of whisper grass, Felix asked Astrid quietly. Do you think the old world will come looking for us? Astrid leaned into him. Maybe. And if it does, we'll tell it a story it's never heard before, she said. He smiled. One that never loops. She kissed him on the cheek. One that lives.